First off, first question, could you explain to us who you are and what you do, just to familiarise us?
I am Andrew Ross, aka the Ghost Whisperer. I set up Walking with the Ghosts in Durham about 3 years ago, and what I do is I take guests around Durham, tell them about the history and the ghost stories of Durham City.
Right, that's good. Right, second question. What is your favourite ghost story? This can be from either Durham or just anywhere in folklore at all, basically.
What is my favourite ghost story? I've got a warped sense of humour, and although I love scary ghost stories, my favourite one is from Shincliffe, and it is about a ghost what haunted Shincliffe back in 1920s. So 1920s, there's a few cars about, not many cars, but there's a few cars, and when the cars are driving up and down Shincliffe Lane, some of them would see a ghostly figure shoot in front of them, and also sometimes they would hear chains rattling and a screaming noise. Sometimes the cars would crash because they had a fright. Cyclists, when they were coming down, again they would see this ghostly figure shoot in front of them, giving them a fright. They would fall off their bikes. Again, they would describe hearing chains rattling and a screaming noise. Pedestrians would rather walk 2 miles further around than come down Shincliffe Lane because they didn't want to see this ghostly figure. The police are notified. The police take a bit of time to come out. 2 or 3 weeks later they come out to investigate. Now when they come out, a police officer comes out to see what's going on. He is on his bike. He is travelling up Shincliffe Lane, and as he's travelling up the lane, the ghostly figure shoots in front of him, gives him a fright. He falls off his bike. He is in a heap, and while he's in a heap he's thinking, hold on, I'm a police officer, I should show a bit of courage here, I should investigate what's happening. So he jumps up. When he jumps up he can hear movement, and it sounds like laughter in the undergrowth further up the bankside. So he starts scurrying himself up the bankside. As he does, 4 adolescents run off. When he gets to where the adolescents were, he finds that what they've done is they've tied a rope on one side of the road in a tree to a tree on the other side of the road. They have put a pulley system on so they can pull backwards and forwards. On this pulley system they've put a heavy duffel coat. Over the top of the duffel coat they put a white sheet. In the white sheets they hung chains, and then they had a tin can with holes in, so when they pulled it backwards and forwards it made a screaming noise or a whistling noise. They had set up a prank to prank people. They had getting a lot of people. Eventually the 4 young lads who had done this are caught. They are prosecuted for causing a nuisance. Now, like I say, I like that story because it is just sort of my sense of humour. That would be something I would have done when I was younger. Yeah. Add on to that story, when I was telling that story a couple of years ago on my walk, after I've told the story, I stopped, and a lady who was on the walk with our group, she says, "Excuse me, can I tell you something about that story?" I said, "Yeah, I'm always interested in hearing further information to see if there's anything I can add to the stories." And she says, "One of them young boys was my grandfather." She said her grandfather was always telling her tall tales. She never knew when she was telling the truth or telling lies. And she says he told her about the time him and 3 of his friends scared Shincliffe Lane with putting a ghost backwards and forwards. And she'd never believed him until I told her the story.
So it was all like a prank?
It was a prank. It was a prank, and like I say, I love that was. And
wow, that's quite a story. Yeah? Wow. You've really got invested in that.
Yeah.
Third question: what inspired your interest for ghosts?
What inspired my interest for ghosts? That would have to go back way back to childhood. When I was about 4 or 5, my aunt would tell me ghostly tales about where I live, and I would love these ghost stories. And when I got older, I would start to investigate these places where I'd heard the ghost stories about the area. It wasn't until I was even older that my aunt told us that these ghost stories, she would tell us them to try and keep me and my cousin away from areas which she didn't want us to go. Her telling us these ghost stories, far from making us scared of the place, made us more inquisitive, and we went to look to see. Age of 10, I was involved in a road traffic accident. I was knocked over.
Oh.
Yeah, I was off school for 3 or 4 months. In this time, one of my mum's friends, her son brought a book over for us. This book was called The Osborne Book of Ghosts, Monsters and UFOs, and it told you all stories about ghosts, monsters and UFOs. That book, Osborne Book of Ghosts, Monsters and UFOs, Osborne's have re-released it because it was a very popular book at the time, and I devoured that book, and that really was the starting of me collecting stories.
Oh, that's good to hear. Right. Fourth question. How do you know when you're in the presence of a ghost? Because you've said this before about sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah. How do you know you're in the presence of a ghost? In the paranormal, people say that if you're in a place and the temperature drops very fast, or the temperature becomes very warm, you may well be in the presence of a ghost. They say that ghostly presence drop the temperature, and you could be in a place. There is stories of people, middle of summer, they are going around a stately home, a castle. They are walking around and they hit a cold spot, and this cold spot is not just a cold spot; it is a freezing cold spot. It is like being in a freezer. The temperature goes that cold. Outside it's red hot. Step 2 or 3 meters from where that spot is, the temperature becomes warm again. Step back into that temperature, the temperature goes very cold.
Cool, thank you. Another question. What role do ghosts play in preserving history and culture?
At the moment, there is a big interest with paranormal groups going out and doing paranormal investigations. Now, they go out and do these paranormal investigations. They may go to old stately homes, castles, but they also may go to community centres, shops, schools, and these places, they charge a fee for the group to go in to investigate. Now, these people going in to investigate, they pay a fee. That fee helps with the running of that place. That helps with the stately home, the castle, keep the place going, and also improve on displays, listing the history of the places. Also, paranormal groups, sometimes you have researchers in it who research the history of the place, and they might come up with some history what previously hasn't been known, and that helps with the place advertising itself to get more people in, more revenue. That helps with the stately home staying. It also helps with the history of the place being held. Sadly, there is some places where history is just lost because people stop going. Sometimes people stop telling the ghost stories, and that is just goes.
There's a little one we talked about during the ghost walk, but could you explain the generator theory in Durham and how it could create false narratives of ghosts?
The thought of that is machinery, generators, refrigerators, anything which is a machine can generate this energy field called infrasound. Now, infrasound is very low, so we cannot hear it, but it can still affect us. Some people call it the ghost frequency because the frequency is at such a frequency that it can make people feel as though they are experiencing something. A researcher, parapsychologist by the name of Richard Wiseman, he set up an experiment. I can't remember exactly offhand what the experiment was, but the theory was he had groups of people going around a supposedly haunted castle. In one room he had set up a machine which was supposed to put out this infrasound frequency at the ghost frequency. He would go around, after people have gone around, he would ask people to write any experiences they had. Now sometimes the machine was working, sometimes the machine wasn't. And he found when the machine was working, there was an increase in people experiencing ghostly or paranormal events in certain rooms.
Whoa.
Yeah, the one in Durham, that is the theatre where the manager, stagehands, they have had experiences on the stage where they've felt a presence, they've seen shadows moving about, and the presence is not very nice and they want to get off the stage. Now behind the theatre there is a generator. That generator is that causing the infrasound to cause that effect, because how they describe is very similar to what the infrasound can cause.
Okay, so Andrew, next question. Could you explain in full detail the story of Jimmy Allen and what he means to Durham?
Jimmy Allen, you have to go right way back to 1734. Jimmy Allen, he is born in Northumberland. His father was what was called an otterman. His father hunted otters on the River Tweed. Now also Jimmy's father played the Northumberland bagpipes. From the age of 3 or 4, his father taught Jimmy how to play the bagpipes. Jimmy learns how to play the bagpipes, and from about 15, 16-year-old, he starts going around playing the bagpipes to make money for himself. Now he eventually is hired by the Percy family in Alnwick Castle to become their residential bagpipe player. While he's there, he travels around the courts of Britain with the Percy family. Percy family love his musical skills, but Jimmy, he's a bit of a rogue. He loves to have a drink, he loves to have a gamble, he is always caught fighting, and he is always chasing after young ladies. He does have a few children out of wedlock. Now the Percy family, they are not very happy because the Percy family are a Catholic family, and so they warn Jimmy, look at Jimmy, please change your ways or we will have to get rid of your services. Now Jimmy, like I say, he's a young lad and he can't change his ways, so he has to leave the Percy family, Alnwick Castle. Now when he leaves Alnwick Castle, there was said that the maids who worked in Alnwick Castle, unbeknown to each other, give Jimmy a part of their week's wage. They don't want to see Jimmy without any money, and they think because he's left the service of the Alnwick Castle, he's going to be short of money. So they say, hey Jimmy, take this money to make sure you're okay. He takes that money, he leaves with a big packet of money. Now over the years he travels around Europe, he goes to the courts, the royal courts in Europe, he applies his musical talent, he is welcome to the court, he has a very decent lifestyle. Over the time, if he got himself into trouble, sometimes he would join the army. Getting himself into trouble, and instead of going to prison, he'd go and join the army, take the king's crown, king's money. He'll be in there for a couple of years. Once he thinks trouble's off, he would desert. It is said he did this 5 times. He also was imprisoned a load of times. He would be caught for minor offences, he'd be imprisoned. He also escaped prison a lot of times. Now Jimmy was a handsome young lad, and he also had the gift of the gab. The prisons back then, they operated on, it was a family business. So they were run, and you would have to pay to be in prison. The more you paid, the better your time in prison was. Jimmy would use his musical skills to make money, so he didn't have too bad a lifetime in prison. But also the young daughters or the wives of the prison owners, they would bring the food down for the prisoners, and Jimmy would say, what is a young girl like you doing in a place like this? You shouldn't be in here, your father shouldn't have you in here, a beautiful girl like you, you should be in the royal courts of Europe. If I could get out of here, I've got some money put by, I'll get you fine jewellery, nice clothes, and I'd take you around the courthouses of Europe. You would see a different lifestyle. The young girls become smitten. This handsome young man who has the way with the words, they would come down with a key to let them out. Let them out, think they're going to go to this new lifestyle. Jimmy would off and away. He was just a chancer. He was a rogue. He got up to many things. Like I said on the walk, Jimmy, his lifestyle would make a great film. Some of the exploits he got up to were he was a rogue. There's one story of he was invited to play as a musician at a wedding at a court, the royal court. When he gets there, there's two violinists there as well, so they are going to be playing the violins. He is going to be playing the bagpipes. The night before the wedding, Jimmy says to the two violinists, "Do you fancy going out for a drink? We're going to be playing together tomorrow, might as well have a drink." So he goes and he's buying drinks. The violinists are getting more and more drunk. Jimmy is slipping the drink, so he's pretending to drink, but when they're not looking, he's either pouring it down the way or chucking it over his shoulder. These violinists become more and more drunk. Jimmy is stone cold sober. Now Jimmy, when the violinists pass out, he goes and he steals their violins and he puts them in a barrel of wine. He also puts his bagpipes into the barrel of wine. He takes off the pipes, but he puts the bag in. The next morning he wakes up and he's one, "My bagpipe's gone, it's gone." And the violinists say, "Our violins are gone as well." So they start searching for these bagpipes, for the violins and the bagpipes. Eventually somebody finds it. Some say that was Jimmy who found it because he knows where it is. He finds the violins and the bagpipes in this barrel of wine. The violinists, they can't use the violins because the bows, with it being wet, are useless. So they cannot play at this wedding. All Jimmy has to do is empty the wine out of his bag, dry it out a bit, and his bagpipes are good to go. So instead of going to this wedding and having to split the fee with the two violinists, Jimmy gets all the money. Now, like I say, he travels around Europe. He eventually comes back to Britain and he comes back to Northumberland. When he's in Northumberland, he would steal horses, cattle and sheep. He would bring them into Durham to sell. He would live off the money. When the money is running out, he would steal horses, cattle and sheep in Durham, take them to Northumberland to sell. He was bringing them backwards and forwards. Sometimes he may well be bringing the same ones backwards and forwards. Eventually, at the age of 73-year-old, he is finally caught for the last time. 73-year-old, he steals a horse from Gateshead. He takes this horse and he is riding it to the borders. He wants to sell it. And he thinks he hasn't got long left to live. The money from this horse is going to see him through and this is going to be his last job. As he's riding, he is spotted. Somebody recognises him, realises the reward on his head. They arrest him. Now, he is arrested just short of Berwick. He was 5 miles short of Berwick. And really, he should have been taken to Berwick to be tried. If he had been, the story would have ended, because at that time, the trial system in Berwick was very harsh. Any crime you did in Berwick, no matter how small, the punishment was death. Berwick was a border town, and it was a bit like the Wild West, so to control the criminals, the harshest way to do it was any crime, no matter what was a hanging. The person who's caught Jimmy realises that if he brings him back to Durham, he'll make more money. So he brings Jimmy back to Durham and he gets a large ransom. When Jimmy is there, he goes to the Assizes Court At the Assizes Court, he is found guilty and the judge wants to hang him. Now his friends, Jimmy has a lot of friends, and they say, he's an old man, you can't hang him. 73-year-old, you have to give him a chance. So the judge says, right, the rest of your life you will spend it in prison. And he did. He spent the next 7 years of his life in prison. He spent 4 years of his life in Owen Gate prison, the North Gate at the top of Sadler Street, and he spent the last 3 years of his life in the Bridlewell prison cell, which is now Jimmy Allen's bar. The bar is named after Jimmy Allen because that is the most famous prisoner what that place had. What does he bring to Durham? A lot of people, especially in the paranormal, have heard the story of Jimmy Allen, and they like to come down to see the place. Now, the owner of Jimmy Allen's himself, when he took over in 2020, he decided that a lot of the structure within in Jimmy Allen's, which would be Bridlewell, he would keep. He has built around it, but everything is still in situ. So if he took the boards and that away, how the prison was when Jimmy was there, that would be there. He loves the history. He loves to tell people about the history of the bar, which he owns now, about it being a prison cell. And like I say, that gets people to come. They love the history. They come. You have the paranormal people who are interested, but you have also people who are interested in prisons, how prisons used to run, and so they like to see around there as well. Like I say, so Jimmy Allen, he is in prison for 7 years. 3 years, his final 3 years is in the Bridlewell, which is now Jimmy Allen's. Now, Jimmy Allen dies on November the 13th, 1810. November the 17th, 1810, there is a letter of pardon sent from the King. People say it's from the King. It was really from the Prince Regent, because the King was going through his madness stage and the Prince Regent, the Prince, was dealing with his affairs. And also, when the story says it was only 4 days later, in actual fact it was nearly 3 months later when he got the letter of pardon.
Yeah. You can still hear the bagpipes.
The bags, yes, in Jimmy Allen's itself, and on Elford Bridge, and also in the Prince Bishop's shopping centre, the outdoor shopping centre, people hear the bagpipes. People be walking along the bridge late at night, nobody about, no nightclubs, no clubs going, nothing, nobody about. They'll hear bagpipes playing, but there's nobody there. In Jimmy Allen's, the manager who had it before, the manager who's in now, he once told me he was doing some paperwork on a Sunday morning. He said all he could hear was a bagpipe. So he turns the radio up to drown out the noise. Turns up the radio, he can hear the noise is drowned out. Colleague comes in, what, you got the radio on? It's so loud for? Blasted bagpipes, he said, I can't concentrate. There's nobody playing the bagpipes. Great, he's gone. So he turns the radio down and he says all he could hear was bagpipes. So he says to his colleague, look, I'm going outside to see where he is, I'm going to ask him to move on. Because in Durham there is a busker who plays the Northumberland bagpipes, and his 3 regular spots are next to the courthouse in the marketplace, on Elford Bridge, or on Framblegate Bridge. So the manager thinks that the busker is playing on Framblegate Bridge and that's what he's hearing. So he pops outside just to ask the busker to move on. He gets outside, there's no busker there. He goes back into the bar, they can hear the bagpipes. So he says they start searching around the building. They get to the top of the stairs, which leads down into the cellar. The sound is loud, so they go down the stairs. The sound is getting louder and louder. Once they get down to the bottom of the stairs, there was a passageway. This passageway now, it is shut off. There is a metal gate on. But at the time, they used to store the barrels up that passageway. He says, I started walking up the passageway, and as you walk up the passageway, you can see alcoves and doorways, because these were the prison cells from Bridlewell Prison. There is some of the doors which are still left. The prison cell doors are still left there. He said as he walked further and further up, the sound got louder and louder until he got right to the top of the tunnel, and he said it sounded as though there was somebody in the cell,
the cell
playing the bagpipes, but there was nobody there.
Alright, cool. My next question was, when I met you in March, you mentioned Jimmy Allen's life was so compelling that you can make a movie about it. What makes you think this? I think you've just explained it. Yeah, because of how long it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'll move on to my second ghost that I'll be studying, which is Frederick Copeman. Could you tell me the story of Frederick Copeman and the hauntings around his place of death as well?
Right, yes. So Frederick Copeman, in 1834, the castle at Durham Cathedral, that at the time was owned by the Bishop of Durham, and he donates the castle as a residence to the University of Durham. He moves to Auckland Castle, and the students, the university takes over the castle next to the cathedral. Now, one of the first students who's supposed to be coming to is a man by the name of Frederick Copeman. He is a student, he is there for 3 years. On his final year, he only leaves his room to go to lectures, go for meals, or go to the library. He doesn't socialise. He wants to do very well for the exams. He wants to prove his family, show that he was worth it, because the family spent a fortune to get him to university. He goes and does the exams. When he goes to do his exams, he comes out. Sadly, he starts to overthink the answers he gave in the exams. I should have wrote this, that question I answered, that was the wrong question, I should have answered this. And he starts to go over and over. People, his friends, could hear him pacing up on a night time all night long. His mood gets darker and darker. On the day of the results, there is still a tradition, but this, back then, it was how you found out if you passed your exams or not. Like I say, it is still a tradition, people still do it, but now, before they go to check the boards, they know the results. But this, back in Frederick's day, what you would do, you come onto Palace Green, you would see there was 4 notice boards, and these are the 4 notice boards. There would be the notices of people who've passed their exams. So the students would come, they would stand, wait to get their chance to check the boards. They would go and check the boards and see how they've done in the exams. Frederick is one of these students. He comes, he waits his turn, eventually comes for his turn, and he gets to the boards. He checks the boards, his name's not on. He checks the boards again. Sadly, his name is not on. 3 times he checks, his name is not on that board. He has failed his exams. He thought he had, his name's not on there, he has failed the exams. So he goes back to his room, room 21. In that room, he's pacing up and down, mood getting blacker and blacker. He's looking out his window, he sees the cathedral, and he realises what he's going to do. He comes out his room, he locks his door, leaves the key in the door. He walks along the path to the cathedral, into the cathedral door, up the steps to the top of the tower, and sadly, once he gets to the top of the tower, he throws himself off. He's killed himself because he's failed his family and he's wasted his time. That's what he thought. Anyway, things are settled and the body is moved. The bursar goes to take the notices off the notices board. When he's taken the notices off, he realises whoever's putting the notices on has pinned one of the notices on top of the name of 3 students. One of the 3 students who the notice is covering is Frederick Copeman. Sadly, he did pass his exams, but his name was covered, so he thought he had failed. Now, the next season, when the new students come in, they are allocated rooms. One of the students is allocated room 21. They start to hear as though somebody's pacing up and down in the room all night long. Their moods start to go blacker and they become more and more depressed. They eventually go and ask if they can move room. The university does allow them to move. Then a next student in, again his noise is moving, as though somebody's pacing up and down, and their moods become darker. The university moves them again. Eventually the university decides that room 21 will not be used for student accommodation. It will only become a storage room, which it is. They now store the blankets and pillows in that room. The cleaners still go past and they hear somebody pacing up and down in that room, but there is nobody in that room 21.
Okay, well, what about Durham Cathedral? Is there any rumours of paranormal activity there, or is it just the university?
In the cathedral there is a lot of paranormal, supposed to be paranormal
About
events.
Frederick Copeman?
Not about Frederick Copeman. Now,
just checking, but yeah.
The Frederick Copeman one, there is a bit of a side note on that one, which I didn't tell you on the walk.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the side note with that one is, when you check to see about the student Frederick Copeman, you do find a Frederick Copeman, and he was a lecturer who died in 1880. Now, he sadly tripped on the black staircase, which is in the castle. He falls down the staircase and he breaks his neck. And that is the only person called Frederick Copeman who's died in the castle.
Oh.
So is it a case that the story has, through time, has been changed? Because in the castle there's a story of a woman who used to like to walk up the black staircase to the top, and sadly one day she tripped and fell, or she had a heart attack, and now her ghost is supposed to haunt the black staircase. Both of them happened around about the same time, round about 1834.
Right, and people getting both confused as well.
People getting confused, but have they heard the story of Frederick Copeman falling down the stairs, and then the story's changed to Frederick Copeman, the student who kills himself, and then the story of the lady who's wandering up and down the stairs.
Alright, cool. Last question on Frederick Copeman is a pretty short one, but which Durham University did he go to? Because I know there's like a bunch of them in Durham.
There is a bunch of them, and sadly, when you try to find which university he goes to, you can't.
Yeah.
As I says, the only reference to anybody called Frederick Copeman is the lecturer who died on the black staircase.
Final ghost, could you explain the story of Annie Walker?
Right, so the story of Annie Walker. So the story of Annie Walker goes back to about the 1627. And the story is that at Lumley Village, just out past Lumley Castle at Chesley Street. Now, there used to be a mill there, and a man by the name of James Graham, or Grime. When you research this story, sometimes the name comes Graham, sometimes the name is Grime. He is working in the mill late at night. As he's working away, he's just about ready to pack up for the night, when this young woman comes to the door. Now this woman, she is covered in blood, she's covered in mud, she has leaves on her, and she says, please help me, I am Annie Walker. She says, my body lies in a dark, dank hole. My uncle got a man to kill me, and he dumped my body in this dark, dank hole. Please help me, please go to the authorities and help bring my killers to justice so I can rest. Now, James Graham, yes, I'll go to the authorities, I will go to the authorities. He goes home and he starts to think about it. I must have been working too hard, I'm starting to hallucinate. So he goes to bed. Next day he does nothing about it, but he starts to work less in the mill. He'll finish earlier on a night, so he's not working late into the night, He comes home. With him finishing earlier on the night time, his work starts to back up, so he has to start working late on the night again. He starts working later on the night again, and when he does go there, again, this figure of the girl comes to him. This time, the blood is dried, it is matted to her face, the mud is dried, and she comes, please help me, I'm Annie Walker, my body's in a dark, dank hole. My uncle has hired a man, Mark Sharp, to kill me, and he dumped my body in a hole. Now she tells him what's happened. Annie Walker was living with her uncle. Her uncle was William Walker, and he had a manor house just outside of Lumley village. She is working there, and a relationship starts, and Annie becomes pregnant. Now, so not to cause problems for him, he says to Annie, look, I know a little place outside of Lumley where nobody knows me, nobody will know you. I have a house there. I have a housekeeper. If you go there to work, once I settle my business and where I can come and join you, we will move in together, we'll get married, and we'll start a family with this child you are carrying. And he agrees to this. He says, my friend Mark Sharp will meet you, and he will take you to your new house where we will have a new life. So Annie agrees, and the next night she waits for Mark Sharp to come. Mark Sharp comes and takes Annie to her new life, or what she thought was going to be a new life. But sadly, Mark Sharp has been paid by William Walker to kill Annie. He takes her along, and once he gets so far along the wood, he kills her and dumps her body down an old pit shaft. He takes his shirt, his shoes, and the murder weapon. He wraps his boots and the murder weapon in his shirt, and he stuffs that into a hole in the bankside of the river. So Annie has told James Grine the story, and he agrees that he will go to the authorities to tell. Again, he goes home. Again, he thinks, I'm working too hard, so he does not tell what's happened. The next night, he is back in the mill. Again, Annie Walker comes to him, but this time she's not very happy. My body is in a dark, dank hole. You've just let me lie there in this dark, dank hole. I've told you who my killers are, but you will not do anything. If you don't help me, I will forever haunt you. James promises, I will go, I will tell the authorities. He goes home on the night time. Annie follows him. Annie shows up in his bedroom and warns him that if he does not go to the authorities the next day, none of his family will ever sleep again in the house. She will always keep them awake at night. James promises he will go and tell the authorities. The next day he does. He goes to the authorities and tells the story of Annie Walker coming to visit him and telling him about him being murdered. The police at first don't believe him, but they go with him. They find the body down in the pit shaft, and also they find the shirt, the boots and the murder weapon, which belongs to Mark Sharp. Once they get these boots and the shirt, they go and arrest Mark Sharp. Straight away, Mark Sharp puts up his hands, admits to it, but he also says that he was paid by William Walker to do the dastardly deed. Now, William Walker and Mark Sharp are put on trial at the courthouse, which used to be in Palace Green. They are put on trial. While they are at trial, a big crowd comes to watch them. There's this ghostly figure appears in the courthouse. Some of the people run. The judge, he wants to run because he's terrified, but he realises he has to be in control of the courthouse. So he calls for order, and then he starts questioning the ghost. Are you Annie Walker? The ghost nods. Have you got a right to be in the courthouse? She nods again. Can you point out your murderer or murderess? Are they in this courthouse? She points to William Walker and she points to Mark Sharp, the two men who were on trial for her murder and for hiring somebody to murder her. The judge has got no choice. He tells the two men that because of the witness of the ghost, the victim of these two men, that he has to find them guilty, and they are both sentenced to death. They are taken and they are hung, and Annie Walker's ghost is never seen again. However, at Lumley Village, just outside of Chesley Street, you walk so far along a path, there is a tree which is supposed to be Annie Walker's tree. And what people would do when they walk along that path, they would drop a stone into this tree stump, so Annie Walker's ghost would not come out and chase them when they were walking along the path. That stone, the tree is still there, and the tree stump is full of stones because over the years people dropped stones in there.
Do you know the exact location of this tree?
Not the exact location, but I could find the location. There's a path from Lumley Village. If you come from Lumley Castle, you go through Lumley Village, and there's a field with this just one tree in the middle of the field, and that is supposed to be it. But I could find where it is.
Final question: do you believe in ghosts?
I do believe in ghosts, but for what ghosts are, I don't know. I'm part of a paranormal group, and in that group I'm classed as a skeptic. I am not a skeptic. Yes, I do believe there's ghosts, but again, like as I said, I don't know what they are. Some people think they are a spirit of a person who's passed. They are energies. I've had my own ghostly experiences. I can't explain what's happened. Yes, they're ghostly, but as I say, I can't explain what they are. I have met many people who tell me stories, things what have happened to them. I can't take that away from them because something has happened to them. But there's many explanations what it could be. And it's the subject itself, there is just that much what it could be, what couldn't be, and how are we to say what is out there.